2,000 years ago, the suffering of one man changed the world. Through the streets of Jerusalem and into the hearts of many. This is the Passion of Christ. Jerusalem.com presents The Way of the Cross as never experienced before. Unseen sights, exclusive interviews, incredible footage, and VIP entrances at every station, anywhere, anytime. Welcome to The Way of the Cross.
Hello and welcome to Jerusalem, to your private video tour. My name is Joel Simhoni, and I'm going to be your private guide to the Via Dolorosa, the Road of Agony, the 14 stations of the Way of the Cross with Jerusalem.com. During the Second Temple period time, the Jewish people from all the provinces of Rome gathered in Jerusalem 3 times a year for the 3 main holidays, the 3 main pilgrimages time. One of them is the Passover. One of these gentlemen who arrived to Jerusalem at that time was a young Galilean leader named Jesus of Nazareth, who was followed by a large group of people. Jesus arrived to Jerusalem to demand social justice and freedom of worship. His demands created turbulence, and the leadership of the time did not like it. They brought him to the Sanhedrin for a hearing, and they found him to be undesirable. From the gathering of the Sanhedrin, Jesus was brought here to the Antonia, to the grand offices of the governor, Pontius Pilatus. Pontius did not want anything to do with it. He claimed it was a Jewish problem. But the pressure of the leaders was tough. To try to avoid any friction, Pontius Pilatus turns to the elders and says, "Is this the man you fear?" And they have replied, "But governor, he is preaching for the kingdom of heaven, and that is treason." Pontius Pilate had no other choice but to condemn Jesus and send him straight out to the dungeons of the Antonia. In the dungeons he will spend time, and within days he will be eventually taken out to the Praetorium, down outside the Antonia, where he'll begin the Via Dolorosa, the Passion of the Christ. We are situated in a beautiful courtyard, together with adjoining different structures. Actually, we are in the center of the Antonia fortress, in their praetorium, where the daily life of the fortress are carried out by the legionnaires. But up in the offices is situated the governor Pontius Pilatus, who just condemned the young men from the Galilee for swift punishment. A rumor floats around that he has mentioned that he is the king of the Jews. The doors will open. The young men will come out into the courtyard, and the legionnaires will stop their daily activity. They will put a crown of thorns into his head. The crown will pierce his skin and blood will drop. The legionnaires will throw all their frustrations of their daily life upon him, as the whip will swish, and again and again. Silence. The eyes are peeled. As the shackles will be free, and that young man, hurt, degraded, punished, will be taken back through those doors, back to Pontius Pilate's offices.
The first question everybody asks is, really it was here? Really we don't know exactly where the Praetorium. There are different opinions among the scholars. Christian tradition maintains that this place was the fortress Antonia. So the fortress Antonia, we know, was in the northern side of the Temple Mount, And it was exactly here where we are now. Also, in other places, we do not have other churches which maintains the same memory. So this is the only one. And this is very beloved by Christian pilgrims. Almost all of them come here before doing their Via Dolorosa.
Here in this beautiful courtyard, you can find two important sites. Behind me, the Church of Flagellation, built by Antonio Berlucci. The unique interior marks the pain and suffering, images relating to the site, to the deed, to the pain. And to the right, the Chapel of Condemnation. Station number 2 is situated within the compound of the monastery of the Flagellation, controlled by the Franciscan brothers in Jerusalem. On the traditional path of the Via Dolorosa, the 14 stations of the Way of the Cross, one passes beneath an arch, traditionally marked as the Ecce Homo arch, the site when Pontius Pilate will try to give Jesus his freedom to the vote of the people. 2 men will be brought from the dungeons to face the nation. One, a Galilean leader, and the other, a thief named Barabbas, some say a freedom fighter. Pontius will escort him to the gates beneath the arch and will raise to the people and say, Ecce Homo, who is the man? Barabbas or Jesus of Nazareth? But the crowd, influenced by the elders, will vote for Barabbas. And that moment of hope, of freedom, will be dashed. And Jesus will return to the dungeons, awaiting his destiny. We are situated here on the actual site of the Ecce Homo arch, in the Sisters of Zion, on the path of agony, the Via Dolorosa, the Passion of Christ.
The arch that we still see on the Via Dolorosa was there at that time, and it was believed because of the scriptures that that was the arch under which Pilate would have condemned Jesus when he said, Ecce Homo, or behold the man. And the architecture was such that there was a small arch on either side. Unfortunately, the one on the other side no longer exists. Later, after the building had already been completed, it was discovered that we had this big pavement underneath as well as cisterns. And so it became clearer that the stones that were part of the pavement had been part of the Antonia fortress, which is next to us. So for the Christian tradition, this is the place where Jesus was condemned to death, and it's part of the beginning of the Via Dolorosa. And so we find that we have a very precious place to remember this sacred event, and it brings people from all over the world together to commemorate, to pray and to remember.
The chamber that we're in now used to be the entrance to a Turkish bathhouse. But today, it marks the station number 3 of the Way of the Cross. Jesus falls for the first time as he enters the center valley Terropeon. The convicts have left the Antonia fortress. Into the narrow alleyways they walk. The crowd is all over, mocking the convicts, enjoying their suffering. The heavy load of the cross on his shoulder, the burden of a crown of thorns on his head. He is crossing beneath the Ecce Homo arch, lifts his head and remember that a day ago, there he stood with a moment of hope for freedom that was shattered by the freedom of another person. But now, the day has come, and he is walking in those streets, due west, towards the lower part of the Terropeon Center Valley. The day is hot. The air is tense. The weight of the cross is unbearable. Step by step, he makes his way down, not to fall. Try to keep the dignity as the crowd all around, as they're reaching this particular place in the center of the Teropeon Valley, turning down south, he will slide and fall for the first time, marking station number 3 in the way of the cross. We are in the Armenian Catholic Church, situated on the traditional site of station number 4 of the Way of the Cross.
This church was before land a Turkish belt. And when the first father came here, he heard that there was a church here before the 4th or 5th century. And in 1881, the second vicar discovered that it was the pavement of mosaics. And on the mosaics, the signs, the traces of the sandals of Mariam. She was waiting his son in his way of the cross. And traditionally, this is the church that remember that Jesus met his mother in his station. Every day, there are many groups come from here. Pilgrims, they pass in this church to see the 4th station and to go to other stations.
It's a Friday afternoon. The crowd has already gathered in the path of the convoy, but far away in the city, through narrow alleyways, 2 women make their way. The young one supporting her oldest, and they are making their way towards the sound of the roar of the crowd. By the sound, they can detect the location of the convicts' convoy within the path to Calvary. Into that narrow alleyway they will enter. The crowd is in front, and the young one will push herself into the crowd, separating the crowd in order to allow Mother Mary to get closer and closer to the path. The centurions have passed her by, the dust is in the air, tension is all around. The first convicts have passed by, but it wasn't him, and she's tense. She's looking to find the one she loves, the one who is walking now with a heavy load of the cross. Suddenly, through the crowd, she can detect her son, walking heavily, carrying the load of the cross, a crown of thorns into his head, and he is walking. "My son," she calls him, "my son." Her voice is carried through the sound of the crowd, and he hears his mother. He will turn. "Mother," he says, "do not worry." They touch for a brief moment as the centurions are pushing and pushing the convicts away.